Today we recognise students that may be in placement or just about to go into placement, and how you have that conversation with the client about the fact that you're still in training. What kind of message does that send out? Does that send a message of, you can't have confidence in me because I'm still a trainee? And there are ways to have this discussion. And Rory, of course, we see this question all the time on our Facebook group.
We do. And if you want to join our Facebook group, go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor. You'll find us there and just join the conversation. Yeah, it's an interesting one, Ken. So when I first started in practice as a student many years ago, the thinking was it was up to the student to explain to the client that I was a student. And that was, for a lot of us, quite uncomfortable. And certainly during one case discussion group we had at college, somebody said that they had a client who just refused to work with a student. And thankfully, we live in more enlightened times. A lot of placement providers now, they usually include the fact that if you go to a charity, you'll almost, for therapy, almost certainly you'll be working with a student in training. And they put that in their literature. They put that on their outward-facing literature. And they also send that as a letter to the client, or maybe an email nowadays, saying that they've allocated someone to work with you and they're a student in training. So that awkward conversation, thankfully, has disappeared. But where it can manifest, where sometimes it can knock students' confidence, is when the client says, oh, you're a student. And being person-centred, the immediate response might be, so how does it feel to work with students? And it can be more of a conversation about confidence in the practitioner as opposed to the client talking about what's on their worried mind. So one of the things that we taught, Ken, when we were teaching, if that question was asked, was to say, I'm a student in my final year of supervised training, just coming to the end of my training, which is absolutely true. If you're in your second year of your diploma, you are in fact coming to the end of your training, because you'll have done an introduction, you'll have done skills, and then you'll go on to a practice-based course, which is a diploma. If it's a degree, same thing applies. And by saying I'm in supervised practice, it gives more of a reassuring tone. It's more about therapeutic messaging to give clients confidence. Therapeutic messaging. I wouldn't personally recommend that students explore that unless the client came back and said, I'm not quite sure I'm getting what I need here because I think you're a student. In which case, I think that becomes a bit of a different conversation. But speaking to a lot of students, it doesn't happen that often. But I think it's to have in your mind that you're a trainee at the end of your supervised training course, coming to the end of your studies, is a very confident message, because that's exactly where you are. And within a short amount of time, you'll have your certificate and you will be a qualified practitioner.
Yes. So here's some givens, non-negotiables. Number one, you have to tell them. They have to know as an ethical imperative. So we cannot ignore this conversation. But what we can do is think very carefully of how we have this conversation. And I'm going to put a phrase out, and that is frame of reference. So if I say student, what does that mean in your mind right now? What do you see when I say student? And is that the same for all people? And it's not. It's going to differ. How we view the word student is going to depend on who we are, what experience we've had. So there is a different way of having this conversation. You are a placement counsellor. That's what you are. That's why it's called placement. You're going into placement as a placement practitioner. What would happen if you changed that word? So if I would imagine if we say placement counsellor to 100 clients, that they may not have the same pre-built frame of reference around that wording. If I say student to 100 potential clients, they might have a thought or a feeling and they'll put into that what they think that looks like. But if I say placement counsellor, it may be a little bit more difficult for them to have a frame of reference to fill that gap with, which allows me to fill the gap in. I can paint what a placement counsellor is. Now, again, you still got to have that conversation, but starting with the word placement, it may go something along these lines. As it says in the contract, I am a placement counsellor. Let me tell you what that means. This means that I'm in the final part of my training. We've covered all the theory and the skills of being a counsellor, and I now go out into practice and I'm supported by a supervisor, and I still have my learning institution that can oversee and guide my practice. And then I would say, do you have any questions that come up for you? Because I've painted a very different picture here. I've taken it from student counsellor, where they can fill in their own gap of what that might look like, and I've said placement counsellor, and I've given a definition, a real definition, a legitimate, justified definition of placement counsellor. We have to say it, we have to be truthful, but we can use professional language, maybe, to remove a preconceived bias that someone may have of what a student is.
Yeah, I think that's very well phrased. I have two observations. I'm in agreement with Professor Tim Bond, and Tim Bond is the person who wrote the book Standards and Ethics in Counselling. And he said he'd be delighted to be counselled by someone in the final year because they're right at the arc of their training. They'd be very attentive, they'd be really keen, they'd be really on point because they were getting reinforced learning every single their training provider. I found that it's in very few cases someone questions your training status. They're more interested in talking about what's on their worried mind. Is if you're sat in front of a client, listen carefully to these wise words. If you're sat in front of a client and you've been on a training course, somebody has had a conversation at some point about your capability to be able to do that. Your tutors and your clinical supervisor and the placement manager are confident that you can work at that level. And I'd lean into that because it can be a bit nerve-wracking.
Definitely. In order to go into placement, you need what is called a fitness to practice letter.
Yes.
That is, your tutor has said the following. You've got an understanding of the core theory. You understand the skills and the practice. You now are ready to go out. It's not like you're going out into the room, being with a client, and then going back to your learning institution and learning a bit more of the theory. What you're doing is you're watching the theory that you've already learned come to life. And not only have you been signed off with a fitness to practice, there are levels of security around that client. Number one, you got to get a placement. And when you go for a placement, you're going to have to go for an interview for that placement. They are now checking that you're the right person to go into that placement. Then you're going to take that client work to a supervisor who is going to be checking that you are competent and okay to work with that client. I think clients working with placement practitioners are protected. They really are, which means that you are protected as the placement counsellor. My closing thoughts on this are, I think this topic is more inside the student or placement counsellor themselves rather than real and live in the room. It does come up from time to time within the room. How to have that conversation is important. Think about what your wording will be. Be prepared for someone who might say, you know what, I don't feel confident working with you. I'm going to tell you a secret now. That happens when you qualify as well. You're going to have an introductory session where you'll meet with a client for 20 minutes to see if you're a good fit together, and you're not going to be a fit for everybody. And that's okay. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's about the client and their right to choose what makes them feel at ease and safe and held.
Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video valuable. For more free resources, have a look at our YouTube channel or visit counsellingtutor.com